All right. Hey, everybody. It's Gimbal Labs Plutus PBL live coding. Today is the 16th of February, 2023. We are planning for the release of our next Plutus PBL course on March 13th, 2023. And the intention today is to look together at where our front-end template ended up after the last iteration of the course. And to just think, on a few different levels about how we can use the template together and how we can really organize our work as the modules roll out. So we've been talking the last few weeks about learning targets and how people might demonstrate mastery of those learning targets. And we've also been starting to think about how there can be a comprehensive experience for students. And so we're trying to accomplish a couple things at once here. The new template that we're going to build is going to be where students experience the PPBL course, while at the same time, they're going to learn how to build directly into that template as it exists. So I have two primary goals today. One is just to look at what we have so far and figure out what's worth keeping and what we ought to be changing. And two is to kind of think about how we organize this work as a Git project and how we make it as seamless as possible for each of us to contribute wherever we can to this shared resource. The template, whatever it is, a couple of weeks from now when the course launches, does not at all have to look like this. And at the start of the last course, it didn't look like this at all. It kind of took this format midway through the course as a work in progress. So I'm excited that we can start from everything we've learned so far. But also there's no rules about what this must be. And hey, Roberto, hey, Adrian, hey, Nelson. I know that some of you guys expressed interest in working on this together. And this is the main thing I'm going to be working on over the next few days after this meeting as well. So first things first, let's start from, I just want to know from folks, as you look, say, at this entry screen, what works about this so far? Are there features here that we should definitely be trying to keep? Are there things that jump off the page at you right away that are going to need to be changed right away? Or just looking at this, if we treat this, I've used the term mystery text a couple times. If we just treat this as a mystery text, what questions does it raise for you as we look at this entry point?
First of all, are we using Canvas or not?
Good. Okay. Let's jump off the deep end and let's say definitely not. Okay. I think we're ready to move beyond it. That will raise a couple of inconveniences in the near term, but I don't think anything that's going to break our process. And so it feels like, when I look at what Canvas offers, it does make it really easy to use the Canvas platform to manage student accounts, to manage progress. But what we're actually delivering to students once they come into that experience is text, video, and assignments. So as long as we have ways to deliver text, which that's kind of the easy part, even at the least efficient, we can be posting text just into React files. And I believe we can improve from there as well. We're delivering video content. We can embed videos anywhere. And then from the assignment perspective, it's interesting. There were two things that I found were pain points for Canvas. One of them was the ability to seamlessly post documentation. A lot of documentation emerges in whether it's a Plutus repo or a front end repo. And what I found myself doing into a lot of the Canvas content was copying and pasting that markdown content from documentation and pretty inconveniently taking time to reformat it. So I would love for there to be a more seamless bridge from the documentation that we're writing anyway on the tools we're building into this platform. And two, I'm not satisfied with the Canvas approach to mastery-based grading. There are other tools that are better for that. Code Wars is compelling, what it offers. But I think we have the opportunity to build in mastery in a more meaningful way than Canvas was allowing us to do. Hey, what do you think?
Yo, oh yeah,
Hey.
there we go. I think, well, from a user experience standpoint, my immediate question was, who is the target market? And the second part was, I'm assuming that these are divs. I would stack them, vertically as opposed to side by side, because right now this sort of like that side is competing with this other side, the the
Yeah.
Canvas lessons, and yeah, so I'll just kind of have them kind of straight down that way. And yeah, and from like going back to the first point I made about who's a target demographic, I think just the simplicity of the onboarding. You referenced Code Wars. I think something similar, from a landing, yeah, exactly, from a landing standpoint, just communicating, H1 and then I don't know, H5 or whatever, and then call to action. In our case, that gets started could be the NAMI thing, right? Because if you click on that, that leads you to like, enter your GitHub, whatever, and then there's a particular word that they use, enlist, right? It sounds like
Yes.
you're going to war.
I like where was that? Yeah,
Get started.
after you go through get started, okay,
Yeah,
enlist.
right
Yeah,
there.
I noticed that verb yesterday too, and I liked it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think just kind of having that funnel focused so that when someone lands, they're able to like kind of compose themselves and figure out what's going on, where how they can go about things. Yeah,
Yeah.
simply that. Yeah.
So an improved landing page, like something
Yeah.
clearer. This right here, this is a lot to take in. And
Yeah.
so just first of all, just from a first thing you see perspective, I think we can do a lot better than this.
Yeah.
And this raises a key distinction and goes to your question about target audience. So, right, this so far in the last iteration of the course, the front end template was never really deployed, right? It was something that people could come, grab the repo, they could run it locally. And once they did, a lot of people on this call have made contributions here. So whether we look at the blockchain queries assignment, whoops, I got to check what version of Dandelion I'm using right now and fix that link. I can do that in just a minute. But people shared some examples of transaction components. These are all broken, it looks like, just because we got to fix the Dandelion link, and I'll do that. And then there was the faucet project. Also an error. Okay, worth fixing. But to stay focused on A's question for a moment, the way I'm imagining it, there's going to be a deployed version of the front end template from day one that serves as that onboarding and by necessity should fulfill what A is talking about. Okay. And that'll be in deployment. And soon after getting started with the course, certainly no later, let's look for a moment as well at Gimbal Labs docs. So at the latest, if we look at the learning targets for the course, the latest people would get their hands on the front end repo is module 201. Maybe we would for some reason mention it earlier. Maybe there's, something starting in 103. We don't have to decide that right now, but assume that there's going to be this deployed version that onboards and delivers initial modules, and that soon the platform itself is the thing that people get access to and start to tinker with from a local environment and make contributions to. Just writing a note for myself over here. Okay. And so that, keep questions coming, just interrupt or raise a hand. But that's really what I wanted to look at together is, okay, if there's going to be these multiple versions, what's the best way to handle that? Okay, so we'll come to that question in just a moment. Sean, what are you thinking?
Hi, so one question I had was like, if I remember correctly, in the last iteration, the front end part happens after we start interacting with CLI and things. So what was the thought behind putting it before that this time?
Say it one more time. Putting what before what?
Putting the front end before the 3 ways to mint a token, because I think it was the other way around in the first iteration.
That's a good point. There was a reason we changed it. This came up in a planning call. I'm trying to remember. I think they could go either way. Yeah, these 201 and 202 could be in either order. And at the risk of betraying whatever the reason was that we originally switched these, I can see a narrative where we say, look, like you're onboarded to the course now. You got a Plutus file, big whoop. I can't do anything with it. So we start showing you what to do with it. And then we show you that, the point of this course is to become a contributor. And with all that in mind, okay, now we'd like to show you the template that you're using to interact with this course in the first place and show you how a couple of things worked. You've had a couple of experiences so far. You minted a token in module 100, but here it is, right? But we didn't tell you anything about how that worked. And so what we're going to do now is take you into this project right here. There's this bit of narrative that I think is real. Like, I find this part really compelling, and I often go back and forth on it when I'm personally working on a project, is like, what's the right time to move from testing a contract on Cardano CLI, which can be somewhat efficient, especially if you've got some good scripts. And I think we're going to have better scripts to guide people through some of these initial learning targets this time around. But there's something wonderful about how much time it saves to test things once you understand how to orchestrate transactions in a front end. And so if we now go into showing people that, okay, you're going to run this project, you're going to learn just a little bit about how some of the stuff you saw in the early onboarding works in terms of connecting a wallet. And you're going to see this idea of conditional rendering, which then raises the question, oh, wow, gosh, I can make a website look different depending on what tokens a user holds. Cool. That makes me want to know more about minting tokens. Okay, so that's now what we're going to focus on. And yeah, you know what? Now that I'm totally bullshitting right now, like just making up a narrative. I think we could make a different one too. But I kind of like this, right? Because if we get to this point and people have already seen the front end, now it starts to be people's choice. Hey, you're going to learn how to mint a token, front end, CLI, Plutus. And you know what? You can follow whatever pathway you want. Does the Cardano CLI fit your needs for what you want to do? Cool, run with that. You want to drop your token into that front end and mess around with it, see what you can get it to do? All right, that's cool too. But I could argue the other order. What do you think?
No, I think I don't remember the conversation, but I remember that it changed things once we had some of these tools to set up the environment, right? Because, module 100 was so overwhelmed with just setting up the environment previously. What what the mesh guys did, and I think it changed the way we looked at module 100 a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Hey.
Yeah. Steve brings up a good point, which the folks over at a Game Changer have been somewhat grappling with, which is how do you design a system that can gradually, elegantly evolve, right? Similar to sort of the hard fork combinator,
Yeah.
right? So Game Changer is shifting from version 1 to version 2. But part of that, obviously, yeah, there's a technical aspect of it, but the other aspect is how do you go about communicating that in documentation and everything else, right? If people are building stuff using V1 and then now V2 is coming on, coming online, there's that whole thing and all this stuff that Mesh did, which simplified, the 100s and 200 and everything actually, right? Because if from the early stages, it kind of has this ripple effect all the way through. It's important to sort of understand how we implemented that, or how the thinking around that particular upgrade was, so that as more upgrades in the future happen, we're able to do that a lot more seamlessly. That's just a quick point which that came to mind when Lockhart just said what he said. The point which actually came to mind previous to that is I think there's something worthwhile perhaps considering in the idea of having gimbal infrastructure, right? Like being able to have like a pinned instance of IPFS. And because we're talking about front ends, right? One of the things I like about what some of the Ethereum folks have done is that, their apps or dApps, have IPFS, entire sort of web directories exist within IPFS. So if whatever, centralized server went down, they're able to just, use that, and connect to the chain, and it's quite resilient. So, if we're talking about front end stuff, I think that would be a helpful way of someone contributing, right? They would, be instantiating an IPFS node, which is really simple and straightforward. Again, contributing to persisting all the other gimbal related stuff. We could even have, videos and a whole bunch of other stuff there. And yeah, I think it will just kind of be quite in keeping with the whole idea of decentralization and creating interfaces which aren't potentially victims of rug pulling from a centralized server standpoint.
Yeah. That's such a compelling idea. Like, just by participating in this course, even if maybe you don't yet fully understand the importance of it, you are contributing to this cluster of servers. Yeah. I want to think more about that. I don't think we'll resolve that right now, but I think this is really worth looking at, is like, what's the earliest in the curriculum we could do something like that. We've looked together, for example, and there's been some really nice contributions on the Miro board, which we'll jump to in just a second. But like the question of when is the right time to introduce Git? It would be really nice to get people early on to, if they've never cloned a Git repo, do it and find out, oh, I can do that, and if they've never submitted a merge request or a pull request, I can do that too, right? That's what an incredible, ground to break on an individual basis. But on the other hand, if you do that too soon, you might bury the real narrative. And so I feel excited about this going here, for example. And so same thing with contributing to that network. And of course, that concept paves the way for other courses that are urgent to build, and when we have the capacity, we will. Dandelion PBL, for example. That's really good. Sean.
Yeah, another thing along those lines of like getting people comfortable with Git, maybe having some kind of thing which encourages you to write simple bash scripts or something like that. That would be interesting, because if you're using CLI a lot, then like bash scripts really, they're your friend. So like and many, like, it took me much longer than I would like to admit to like start using bash scripts like regularly. And I feel like getting people comfortable with that would be interesting.
In the last iteration of the course, we did a lot of like, hey, build the transaction in a text file or a markdown file, and then copy and paste it into the CLI. And I would like to balance in a non-overwhelming way, getting people's hands on bash scripts. And that I would love for that to be a priority of module 102. Yes, we're teaching people Cardano CLI, even something like query, right? Just look, check it out. There's one line of code you have to use to query the blockchain once you have a node running. And you could really unlock people's imagination if you just show them, hey, by the way, write that line of code in a text file, give it a .sh extension, run it, boom. Like that's a compelling experience for a dev to have when they say, wait a minute, that's all bash is? Cool. And the outcome of this has been something Roberto and I have been talking about since we met each other. Look, a bash script is something in between documentation and pseudocode. And what we really want people to be able to do is, yes, write a bash script. It's so helpful. It makes things so much more efficient. But even more importantly, use that as the roadmap for the thing you have to build in your real application. And so I would like to see a clear line from any bash scripts that we show people, hopefully even teach people how to create here, to the front end template, right? Once I have that shows me the transaction I need to build. And now I can almost read a bash script like it's a checklist where I say, okay, this is this part of the transaction. I'm going to need these inputs from over here. These outputs are going to go like this, and so on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like that sounds perfect because having this through line from like testing on Cardano CLI to doing front end. And actually, if I'm not wrong, I think now Mesh allows people to get like their Cardano CLI wallets, like their S key and the V key, and import that into Mesh. And so like maybe that could be like creating a testing wallet in CLI using a bash script
Yeah,
and then importing that into Mesh when you're testing your app or something.
yeah. And talk about playing with fire, right? Like it's such a wonderful experience. I've actually made just a couple of like projects that I only keep locally that have a couple of signing keys in them that just make life really easy when I have to blast out, a PPBL 2022 token. It's all just there. It mints from Mesh. It's such an unbelievable experience. And it's so gosh darn dangerous, right? Because as soon as you start putting private keys in a repo, you are one mistake away from putting a mainnet signing key on GitLab, which is we have to show people like, hey, look at how amazing this is, and also look at how dangerous this is right now. And right, we're teaching a few things at once in that case. Mix.
Yeah. Like you always have to like do this delicate balance between like convenience and making sure you're not like making a catastrophic mistake. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And this is our job as teachers, right? Is okay, like, hey, is this person ready to see the next level of abstraction? Do they understand the trade-offs of abstracting a thing to this point? And it's hard to know for sure if somebody really understands what they're doing. So we have to keep thinking about that. Hey, Mix.
Hey, James, everyone. I just wanted to ask this question about the one thing that yesterday I was helping one person asking about how can I create mnemonic
Yeah,
phrases out of SK and VK, and I told him that it's not possible. I mean, that's a step we should be happening before that. And he said that there is no any guide for tested or mainnet to create that on the CLI. So I'm asking that why we are not doing that. I mean, not why we are not using Cardano addresses or Cardano wallet. Create first those phrases and then private keys and then signing key, verification key, and then drive addresses from it. I mean, why we are not doing that?
brilliant. Yeah.
James did that in 2020. There's a video.
Well, no, so much has changed, and here's the thing.
Okay, so why we are not using that video, for example, in Discord?
First of all, thanks for hitting that guy back in the chat. I didn't have time to write back, and what I wanted to say to that is, here's a chance. If somebody's asking that question, they're really ready to learn something important, right? Like I love it when people get to that question. I remember having that question myself. And that's what helped me really understand the historical development of Bitcoin, right? At the advent of Bitcoin, there were not mnemonics. There were key file pairs. And people recognized, hey, this needs to be more user-friendly. And that's where the Bitcoin improvement proposal came from that gave us mnemonics. And it's mnemonic first, right? You create a mnemonic from which then key files can be derived and not the other way around. And kind of seeing that historical perspective, I think, is really good for people. The only reason we're not yet using Cardano address and Cardano wallet in the course is because we just haven't done it yet. But there's no reason not to. So if that fits, if we should have some learning targets, for that, let's think about the right time to introduce that. My instinct is that it's worth it for people to see this first, And it's worth it to try to get people, like the magic trick we're trying to do here is get as many people on their own to ask that same question that that person in the Discord asked, right? Hey, what about mnemonics? Can I make mnemonics now that I generated these files using Cardano CLI? And if people ask that question without us asking it for them, that's a much more compelling learning opportunity.
Okay, let's see though.
So let's think of anybody who is starting to think about, I guess I could see it fitting anywhere 202 or beyond. And so anybody who's starting to think about these, if you have ideas about when to introduce Cardano address and Cardano wallet, I think that's beautiful. And we can certainly add learning targets to some of these later modules. Hey.
Yo, yeah, actually, just to add on to Mix's point, an idea that comes to mind is of having sort of the potential to reference a parallel module, because when he said wallet, the first thing that came to him, I was like, oh yeah, that I can see that being in the Dandelion PBL. Yeah, so I think that maybe it would be interesting to kind of have these opportunities to be able to, like, hey, to point people to a specific module that lives elsewhere, which could count, as opposed to having it repeated. I think, and also that'll just kind of unlock people's minds, like, okay, I'm doing this, which is like the basics, but then I got sort of ported over to this Dandelion thing, to do this specific thing that has to do with wallets. And when I was there, I had a look at what the hell that was, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm gonna come back to this, before they sort of carry on the thing that they were doing before.
Yeah. No, that's the ideal. I think we all have to be aiming for is look, we're building a web of learning materials that will cross-reference each other more and more over time. And I appreciated Alex so much saying it yesterday. This is what a cool chance to lean on each other, right? And really deploy our strengths, what each of us has had time to learn so far, to the point where we can teach it, learning from each other where we haven't yet. I'm a student of Alex right now as he continues to learn about testing and unit testing. So same thing in every direction. The more we build, the more we should be looking for opportunities to cross-reference things. Yes, I know. I miss that guy. We are each other's redundancy. I'm just checking, just for fun. I just added, I was talking to Nelson yesterday about there are 2 Dandelion instances on both mainnet and pre-prod. So there's the D.1 and the one without the D. And so I just added D dot to this project. Let's see if everything shows up the way it's supposed to now. Yeah, error solved. Okay, so that's nice to see that this still works. And what I really wanted to look at, for example, here is the Faucet Mini project. Now, this wasn't part of original plans when the course launched in July. And this was an exciting mini project that kind of appeared for us, that allows us to think about the concept of a headless dApp, right? This gets people to instantiate a single contract just by tweaking a parameter or two, and then to share their contract, and then for us to, using a metadata registry, have this list. I would love to include this project once again. I think it's really powerful. I think there's stuff we can clean up here. The style is ridiculous on purpose. So please, every time you notice that this stuff looks crazy, or that, you know, that something like this, like A said, should be stacked, please share that feedback. I just have not cultivated any skills, but I don't think I have a talent for it anyway in you know, user interface design, and could use any help. So anytime anybody has ideas for how to make this thing more beautiful, I'm all ears and can't wait to have support on that. But in the meantime, what you can count on me to do is make things that look ridiculous, because that feels less embarrassing than trying to be cool. So we have this proof of concept here for an application. I think we can run this again. And if we look at the learning targets, I had this kind of question right here. Where does the faucet project fit? Maybe it makes more sense for this to kind of be the culmination of onboarding and BBK, and to give it a 200 number rather than, you know, this can be, I think, the bridge to specializing. Anybody, as I shared that, like, where does this best fit in 300 or 200? Does anybody have any aha moments about where you think it should go? Another way to say the question is, I mean, essentially, we could swap getting into Plutus validators in this. This could kind of be the culmination of minting and just compiling a very basic Plutus script, because so little of it, you know, you don't need to know what datum and redeemer are to change a parameter in the simple faucet contract. So I could even make an argument for making this one 204, and then this one would be either 205 or 301, as people opt in to specializing a little bit more in Plutus. Any strong
To
feelings
me, that
about
makes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Nelson. Yeah, I think flip it or bump it down to 204. Oh, okay. I thought you couldn't hear me.
You feel
Yeah,
good
bump it
about
down.
you feel good about the faucet being above writing and using Plutus validators?
Yeah, because as you said, it makes sense because everything else preceding that is in alignment with, you know, tokens and stuff like that.
And then this is where I start to specialize in Plutus if that's what I want. And this goes back, we kind of alluded to this, a couple of us, a few minutes ago, but this is what's really different this year. You know, now that the last time we did the course, Mesh was just rolling out in real time. Now it's established. And what it's made possible is our ability to say, look, that Plutus script, however you got it, Demeter, from your own local environment that's fully set up and working, or even from one of these other tools, Aiken, there's the new one, I forget the name of it, in Python. There's the PluTS work that Michelle is doing. The end result of all of those is, okay, now you've got your CBOR, you've got your script. Now what do you do with it? So much of the work happens there after the Plutus file has now been compiled. And I think this really allows us to kind of emphasize that point and let people choose where they really want to be focusing. And there's actually a real context to this, dating back to, A remembers this, our work with the UNSIGS team building a marketplace for them back in late 2021. We built contracts that work. They became JPEG Store. And we had no way of handing them off to a community who was able to use them. And that process has repeated for me several times in the last 18 months, where, fine, you can build a contract, but if there's not a team ready and waiting to now take that contract that's been written it's essentially worthless, right? And I've had this chance more recently with able dev teams who want to build. But if you're starting from nothing, right? If you've never thought about the UTXO model, can you be a front-end developer on Cardano? And I would tend to say no. You have to at least have that, I've come to think it's more important to understand transactions and UTXOs even than validators if you want to be able to take a Plutus file and build a front end. So thinking about including a faucet project earlier, if there's no objections, I think it's great to formally make this change where this one comes before this one. We can decide, if this is 205 or 301. Okay. But with that in mind, now let's think about GPTE. A mentioned, that we've got Gimbal Labs infrastructure, things like Dandelion. We can aspire to having a well-distributed IPFS pinning service. But then we also have some contracts, like the GPTE contracts. And it would be trivial at this point to use the GPTE contracts on pre-prod for students working through the course to commit to completing a module, just like, we can commit to completing a project on the live deployment of GPTE. So that's the next thing I wanted to bring. If we know that we're going to build an integrated repository, there's going to be a live version in deployment where people come and they just start to have this web-based experience of onboarding to the course. Eventually, they get the repo and they can run that front-end template locally. Could it make sense to use the GPTE contracts to organize commitments to learning and then distribute? In that case, it's not like we're distributing rewards on mainnet. We're just unlocking your student tokens so that you can now move to the next thing. Can you imagine that? Or can anybody think of blockers that would make that a bad idea?
The thing personally that comes to mind, I think it's worthwhile having kind of like a comprehensive approach to just understanding how to best utilize tokens across any sort of any other current existing vertical or any future existing or future to exist verticals.
What's on your short list of the ways we have to teach people to utilize tokens within, let's say, the 100 and 200 level modules?
I suppose there's multi sort of dimensional aspects to this, but the short list would be, on one hand, we have test tokens, right? And then on the other hand, we have what the hell are they called? So the equivalent of a degree, or like, qualification tokens to say that,
Credential,
credential,
completion
right?
credential, yeah.
Yeah. And even within that, there are different ways that one can go about stuff. Like, I was actually just thinking about this last night when I was working on some stuff where, alternative to having, more and more tokens created could actually just be utilizing a single token and having it just transferred back and forth with the transaction metadata being updated, right? So there are a number of ways that can be implemented, and one can even go further to like creating like a key pair relationship where, because this stuff is living on chain, going back to what you're saying about OUOD. Wait, did I say that right?
Yep. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. The idea of having info on chain public, which wouldn't particularly be a good idea, then that could be an additional component to this, where a key pair where only those specific two individuals are able to do that. And then another step beyond that could then be how to, in a simple way, in a sort of zero knowledge way, a future employer could be able to query specific things across all those encrypted environments, kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, so I say that to say that, yeah, from a tokenomic standpoint, I think, yeah, it would be cool to just kind of have like a presentation of like, okay, here are the different things, or maybe even plotting it like on a graph, to sort of say, okay, we can do this, but then this will be the cost of that, or we could do that. And yeah, and just kind of having an iterative loop around that, I think would be helpful, because what we're asking for fundamentally here is, hey, this is the root of trust, right? Or this is where we're anchoring the value that has been accrued. That's what's here when I'm talking about, what I'm talking about is the sort of credentialing level, but also, in the sort of burning and minting standpoint, to kind of speak to being able to do stuff efficiently there. Yeah, but yeah, that's it.
That's
Those are
really
my
good.
thoughts.
Really good. Thank you. Okay, let me do this. So I've been taking a couple notes on the shared Miro over here. I'm going to call it up on the screen in just a moment. And I'm dropping a link in the chat. So these are just a couple of my notes that I've collected so far from this call today. They're just over here, kind of loosely placed off to the right-hand side of our timeline. I think this one's a no-brainer, right? High impact landing page. Just some concepts about these connections between documentation, Bash, our possible ability to say you could build a wallet. I see a connection between asking somebody, showing somebody, hey, basically you could build your own wallet right now. That might be precisely the thing that leads people to say, hey, what about mnemonics? Which could be a really interesting way to build a course narrative. We're going to be linking between everything we build. We have a chance to practice it within this course, but also soon enough beyond this course. This concept, I think this one right here, having an IPFS instance and finding a way to make this statement true. Hey, just by participating here, contributing, this might be a focus group right here if anybody wants to take that on. And then this question about GPTE raises what A was just saying about utilizing tokens. And I love what you said right here, the root of trust, or where we're anchoring value that's been accrued. We really want to get people to think about, when is it useful to have a token, right? And we also, I don't want to be overly prescriptive on that, right? What my preference would be to put people in situations where they get to ask these questions and make their own decisions. And so, for example, I could argue for overusing tokens at first and showing people the transaction costs so that we can then ask the question, hey, look, that system's pretty expensive. How could we make it more efficient? Is a really good learning experience to go through together. I do think it's worth it to think about the names we are putting on contributor tokens from the very earliest. I think it's worth it to move away from asking people to use a first name. So, you know, somebody in one of our calls in the last few weeks was talking about the way that, you know, Docker images are named with those ridiculous pairs of animal names or whatever. You know, we could do something like that where we just assign somebody a ridiculous moniker or alias when they get their contributor token. We don't have to decide on that right now, but something to think about is that kind of token naming process, and even our strict adherence to SIP 68 as it's currently proposed is up for debate. I mentioned last week the current naming convention. It's not, it doesn't feel necessary to me, and it feels like we could play with that a little bit more. So through lines here, but I'm not hearing any objections to trying to integrate GPTE early on with the course. And so I'd like to continue thinking about this, and please, let's all do this. As I dive into development time over the next 4 days, this is my goal, is to kind of set up this simple instance, and I'll be reaching out for help along the way and keeping you guys posted in Discord. I know there's a couple people who said they want to help, and I do see a connection from building this front end template to what we were talking about a few weeks ago with having a mainnet deployment for onboarding to Gimbal Labs more generally. I see that as kind of an outcome that can just kind of happen naturally if we build for the course first. Let me pause there. I want to come back to repo management and how we think about branches is the last big topic I want to bring today. But let me kick it to Mix first.
I just wanted to suggest about how to best utilize tokens. What if we can utilize tokens as a way of voting? Because we have different level of approval in one bounty or two, or that the project is getting done. So what if we can use token in the means for voting, not just for signature, but even the minting or burning the token, and the design pattern of these between the project and the whole governance system will be handled by tokens. So, I mean, what do you think about this?
Absolutely critical. I think it's so exciting to work on that. Two specific things I'm thinking about that. First of all, if we decide to go this route of using the GPTE contracts on pre-prod for people to move through the course, we're going to have more than one issuer this time. Okay, so the mainnet instance of GPTE, I have the one issuer token, right? And that's just because that's where we started. Okay. A really exciting outcome of this is that one of the things it can mean to be a teacher in this course is you get the issuer token that allows you to grade somebody, you know, essentially you're the gatekeeper, right? You're the person who says, yes, this student did complete this module, and I am distributing their contributor token back to them so that they can access the next module. I would love for as many of us as possible to be the holders of those issuer tokens and to define, you know, to all commit to doing that work of grading essentially and moving people along. The other thing with regards to voting tokens, that's been kind of an empty validator in the GPTE project for a little while. I just haven't had time to go back to it, but from dating back a couple months, we started talking about approval of both projects being added to a GPTE instance and of distribution happening. And I think that this kind of small scale voting, should this project be listed, and should this person who made this commitment, did they sufficiently deliver on it? I think it's really interesting to play around with prototypes, right? These are voting prototypes for simple use cases that would lead us in that direction. That's something I would definitely like to build. And that could fit into some of the later modules of the course, is extending GPT that way.
You know, James, last week on Friday, with that live coding session, I asked people that how do they want to go with this advanced Plutus session?
Yeah.
And the end result was, let's work on implementing different voting system of governance system, even dictatorship, into blockchain and writing a smart contract, not just one, several, and the series. Into that. So this is how, I mean, as the people decided, and we will go to it on Friday, we will work on the different voting system. Also, one thing that maybe we can implement a specific on this, and I can talk to you because I implemented in the equivalent already. I spoke about this, that about the guardian contract, access control contract, and gatekeeper, and so on. The model is role-based access control. If you guys know cybersecurity or something, you can check it out. Role-based, attribute-based, and next generation. They are the category of a zero trust architecture for organization. I mean, it's well known. So I implemented role-based access control, and by that we can kind of actually remove the responsibility of you being a issuer. So we can have a council of people, like several of people, and those guys, by not just token, but even the existence of UTXO, but just presence of UTXO can approve or disapprove an action. That's already implemented. So that's also, we can discuss about it to implement this. But about the voting system, definitely on Friday, that's the thing that I hope we will do it, and we will, I mean, the end result will come to the mainnet even.
That's incredible. Okay, you just blew my mind in like 6 different ways. I can't even debrief on all of them right now. But dude, this concept of encapsulating different governance models, even those that we maybe disapprove of, like dictatorship, which
exactly.
Most people don't really in their day-to-day lives disapprove of dictatorship, right? We all look for dictators, but that's, I guess, beyond the scope of this meeting.
And one might say, what do you mean by dictatorship? Like one signature
Exactly
to run something?
Well,
No.
but that's the point, right?
One
By
smart
implementing
contract to
all
rule
of
them
those.
all. So
Yeah, that's incredible. To have a catalog, hey, look, here's some contracts that apply to this model, is such a cool way. That's a really cool lens for learning how Plutus works.
Quick question. I'm aware that Nelson and Mick still has his still have their hand up, but just to, on this point, is this Mix? Are you referring to the appointment which was on the Gimbal calendar from like 2 weeks or so ago, which isn't
a smart
there anymore?
contract gladiator that's happening.
Yeah. Could you then please put it back on the calendar?
Sure.
I can put that. I'll add that back to the calendar.
So this is the beginning, by the way. And you might say, why a smart contract gladiator? Because in future, I don't know when, but in future, we will have an arena. So the voting system creates for people like, hey, your responsibility is to create a smart contract. Another person's responsibility is creating a smart contract, and you're both a smart contract come into transaction, and we'll see which one wins. So the arena will be the transaction, and your gladiator will be the smart contract. So I hope that I will see it in future. But yeah, that's end goal.
It's like slot battles. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
exactly.
let's do this.
Well, that goes back to the topic yesterday of, I mean, and being each other's redundancy, or as A said, this is now we're talking about what? Capture the Flag plus Game of Thrones plus Gladiator. But what's the end result of it, right? We are all each other's auditors. What an amazing community to get to build if we know, and there's some interesting incentive modeling to try to do there to really give us all a reason to be that support for each other. Like that's good. That's really exciting. I have some
Oh,
questions
man.
about the role-based authentication too, but I want to kick it to Nelson for just a sec. Hey, Nelson.
Oh, yeah. Hi, guys. That went so far. Okay. I just wanted to understand that we are having the assumption of, of the issue with respinning of testnets, right? Like, do we have a backup plan on that? Like, just wanted to.
Very good. Very good. Right. Okay. So scenario here, we start the course, we start collecting mastery data on some contributor tokens. And then next thing we know, all of that is rugged because testnet or pre-prod breaks and a new one starts up, right? We got to go into that understanding that. One thing I've been thinking about is, okay, clearly we need a plan. One option is to have our own testnet running. And I don't see that happening within the next few weeks, right? Be it, getting enough of us running stake pools to support some additional network. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. So as much as that would be the ideal, let's think about other approaches. First of all, even when the network breaks, it's still visible to anybody who has a copy of that chain. Okay, so what broke last year with testnet is our ability to continue using it. But even after that happened, we were able to view its current state, long story short. And so worst case scenario, we pull down the data as it is, and then go through a process that would take a little time, but it wouldn't really be that hard to then just kind of pass contributor token metadata, right? We're not going to grab the whole transaction record, but if we capture the right information in the metadatum for a contributor token, we can just remint in that current snapshot. And it might be worth it to create a system from scratch, assuming that we're going to have to do that, right? And if we don't use it, it's still a good tool. So yeah, thinking about how do we, and this is indexing, right? How do we index the critical data on a network that we might not be able to depend on, is absolutely important. Sorry, that's only a partial answer for now, Nelson. but yeah, and if anybody wants, like, that's another place where if anybody wants to zoom in on that, that's an incredible contribution if that feels compelling to anybody. But definitely more to come on that. I'll add this back to the calendar, smart contract gladiator. And Sean and I were exchanging messages earlier today, wondering if we could either do a takeover of smart contract gladiator next Friday and join you guys there to talk about like a Plutus puzzles roadmap, or maybe next Friday we'll just do a separate meeting to focus on that. I'll follow up with everybody.
Absolutely. Because it's kind of gamifying the learning. One of them can be puzzle, but one of them can be gladiator, or there will be more. But definitely this fits into that category of gamifying, and not just making easy for people to learn Plutus. In my personal experience, that if we gamify something, your mindset become much more clear, so you can understand the whole concept. For some reason, human understand games and games logic much more faster than, I don't know, a business logic or something. Maybe it's because it's fun, maybe it's not boring. So definitely, yeah, let's do it.
Rock and roll. Oh, that's gonna be fun. Okay, looking forward to that. That's Friday, the 24th. I can't make it tomorrow, but Mix, thank you for the leadership there. It's really exciting to see that up and running. Hey. Mhm.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a little bit about actually just give me one moment. I've been thinking about things adjacent to what to the topic that Nelson just brought up. I'll just quickly paste something into oh man, into here. Hopefully it'll show up. Oh, it showed up but quite small. I'll try and oh yeah, there we go. Hopefully you could you could be able to see it. Yeah. I think one of the things which is important here, has that turned up? Yes, it has. One of the things that's important is making creating more levels of accessibility. So one of the things I've been sort of messing around with is a visual programming language type approach where you're basically sort of interconnecting sort of like different cards, and you could have sort of different properties within different ones, and the idea is to have sort of like different different stuff running locally, right? So you can sort of imagine like a container running where you go over to testnet, and you're able to sort of tweak a whole bunch of different parameters, and just really mess around with stuff, even possibly doing something like a stake pool as well. I think just having such an environment I think would be quite helpful. And what's great about this, in addition, is the redundancy aspect, right? If one is if there's a network which is being run locally, then we're not at the mercy of IO rugging and having to then spend a whole bunch of time remapping all that old transaction data and stuff. So yeah, if anyone's interested in sort of thinking about such approaches, or making things a little bit more accessible and visual,
But hey,
I'm
have you
always
worked
welcome
with
to
that
talk.
motion canvas library that you mentioned in Discord too? Have you worked with that? Have you created an
No.
animation with it?
No. I mean, I mentioned that because it's made in TypeScript, and a bunch of people have been working or thinking about that. And that's, I suppose, more for like these YouTube videos which people do, which you're able to utilize it to communicate more complex visualizations of stuff based on code. Yeah, I'll just put it there as a reference for anyone else that might be interested. I personally, I'm more focused on building using Swift, and not so much JavaScript or TypeScript or any sort of web related stuff.
Well, it's interesting. I check it out. It's exactly like After Effects, but running by TypeScript
in the browser.
and you can in the browser.
Yeah. I'm glad someone checked it out.
I looked at it briefly.
Actually, I found the creator and check out his video. He has something like called devlog, and I like the word devlog. That was really interesting to me. And then I said that this guy is creating animation, is fine, and he created that library, and now it's open source. So I subscribe to him, and I'm checking out. Thank you for mentioning.
Sure. All right. Cool. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm gonna get rid of the image, but yeah.
I like this image. Makes me want to play with some software synths. This looks like a patch bay.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to stop the live stream early today because there's two more quick things I want to bring to you guys privately. But real quick, branches. If we think about the front end template as something that's going to be both in deployment and available as a working repo that students can pull down and learn from. I think it's going to be essential this time around to have clearly leveled branches in that front end template, right? So we can say, okay, if you're on module X, go to this branch and it's going to meet you right where you're at right now. So there's a little bit of organizing to do there. And for anybody who's interested in helping with the front end, I just ask for your feedback on that and your help thinking over these next 3 weeks as we get that repo to the point where it is as student friendly as possible. I'll just be asking for your attention on that topic. But I think it's okay just to put that on everybody's radar for now. And I'll be following up as early as the next few days as this work really starts to kick off. Any questions? Does that make sense what I just said about branch management? All right. So here we go. This is thank you for this session today. I feel really excited to have just had a chance to just run around with a few ideas. If you see something in the conversation today that you want to run with, I hope everybody can recognize, as always, there's more to do than we're collectively going to have time to finish over the next few weeks. And I want us to just see the beauty in that, right? We're going to do as much as we can in the next 3 weeks. We're going to push our goals along. There's still going to be unfinished stuff. There's still going to be work to do as the course launches, but that's what we signed up for. So great spot to be. I'm really excited to take these insights into starting to organize that repository, and I'll be sharing updates and asking for help first half of tomorrow and throughout the next couple of days. Thanks, everybody. Sean.
Take care.
Hey, is it okay since we have a little bit of time if I ask an off-topic question a little bit?
Definitely. I have 2 off-topic things as well. Let me stop the live stream. We'll start with you, and then if there's time, I got 2 things to run by you as well.
Let's talk about market. Price of Bitcoin is rising.
This is the financial advice section of Gimbal Labs Playground, but we're going